chats, we've talked about currency and how it operates and the foreign exchange rates and currency rates. Look at previous streams, sessions on the Black 10K site. Facebook is looking to launch its own smartwatch next summer. Imagine who they're trying to compete against. Um, Keystone XL pipeline was plugged by their parent company, TC Energy. And they decided that they're not going to pursue the legal matter further, which means that they're going to kind of figure out another way to possibly do away with that pipeline. And if you all will recall, a few years back, there was much controversy, many legal lawsuits as to where that pipeline could run throughout from Canada to Central South America, running through the U.S. And they were concerned about, while there were arguments about green and the ecology, there was also the counter argument was the amount of money that it would bring to the macro economy. And so now TC Energy has decided that they're going to kind of plug, if you will, that initiative, which is a blow against fossil fuels and a potential nod to green energy. If you haven't been watching the news last week, if you have, or if you haven't, you don't know that there's this race to space between Jeff Bezos and Sir Richard Branson. And why that's important is not just for the sake of travel to space, but there are direct and indirect services and manufactured goods supply chain opportunities that are associated with that. So as you think through what would be necessary, what would be needed for that project or projects to get off the ground, there are, again, indirect and direct contracting opportunities that your business or businesses may be able to fall in line with the supply chain that would get the technology and the ability for space tourism, which is going to be the next new tourism. So we've got, general tourism, hospitality. We have biotourism, which is located mostly in the Caribbean, Central and South America. And now we're going to expand the tourism to include space tourism. And so there is a whole supply chain that would be directly involved with that. If you are wondering why food prices are rising, one of the reasons could have been because JBS, which is a Brazilian company, they are the world's largest meat processor. They were recently a victim of cyber attacks, specifically targeting their US and Australian operations. And the investigation has led that it was Russian hackers. And I suspect that going forward, anything that has to do with cyber attack is going to be Russian or Iranian. But in this instance, Russian attackers were identified, and JBS decided to go ahead and pay the $11 million ransom so that they could get the US plant and the Australian plants back operational. And so again, that supply chain has been interrupted. So you're going to start seeing food prices go up a little bit. As the US, as different states are legislating marijuana and THC and CBD products and consumption, the next thing to be on the horizon that we will want to look at is something called the psychedelic medication for mental health. There was a recent medical study done in I think in the AMA, the American Medical Journal. I think that was the one. But there was a recent survey that said that of mental health patients, 50 to 66% of the mental health patients that were being treated with traditional or current antidepressant drugs found the treatments ineffective. And with that, it's causing, hold on just a second. Let's see. It's causing, do you see that?
I'm on mute. I see someone
Okay.
saying no video. Everybody, if you hear Dr. Cheri and see her, put a one in the chat for me if you
Yes.
have no problems hearing and seeing. Okay, so unfortunately, for whomever this is, I think it's just on your end.
Okay.
I don't know who even said that, so keep
Okay.
going.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. We want to make sure that you all get this good information. So, because there's such a high number of treatment that's being viewed as ineffective, mental health professionals are looking for other forms of treatment. And so, one of those forms is psychedelic compounds like LSD, MDMA. Um, there's also, and why this is important is because this has the potential, mental health professionals looking to this as a form of treatment. um, then you start the process of getting legislation on board to make this more mainstream. And in the event that it does become mainstream, you're looking at anywhere, at a minimum of about $100 billion market. And so, keep an eye out, ear out for the medical community and especially mental health as it's being brought to the forefront. So, as you hearing a lot about self care, you're hearing about mental health, and you're seeing, I know, where I teach at, there's been, and universities across the country, the student body as well as faculty and staff, because of pandemic and other issues, we're seeing a higher reported incidence of mental health issues. And so, when you have, current treatments not effective, where to next? Here you're looking at a potential 100 billion with a B plus market. Um, in terms of government, the Biden administration has announced plans to collect an additional 700 billion with a B in revenue over the next 10 years, and they're going after tax avoiders. So hopefully you all are not avoiding taxes. And this past Thursday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and we've talked about her in previous fireside chats, announced that 130 nations, China and India included, have agreed to a 15% global minimum corporate tax rate that will go into effect in 2023. And basically, it's a price floor. So, countries that have typically been charging a single digit, less than 10% corporate tax rate, which is what they were using to attract specifically US businesses, but just global businesses in general to their countries. What they're finding is that companies are increasing their presence, but not necessarily increasing their sales, excuse me. They're increasing their sales in those countries, but not increasing their presence, not literally moving to those countries. And so they're losing out. And that's what has allowed a lot of these most of these 130 nations to say we need to set some type of standard. So what does that mean? That means that you'll see companies start rethinking. If everybody's doing 15 minimum, then you're going to start seeing companies trying to figure out what other incentives they can get to stay where they're at. Otherwise, you might start seeing some reshoring here to the US.
Now,
And
does that include the main ones, Bermuda, Ireland? You know,
yes,
it does.
yes,
Interesting.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Cayman
yes,
Islands too?
yes, in the Cayman Islands too. Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
and some not so known, not so well-known Asian countries as well.
Hmm.
So so you've got like Macau and some other countries in the Southeast Asian region as well that are in single digits. And so, with this 15% minimum, it's supposed to give everyone a level playing field. But it was also a knee-jerk reaction because of some things that Facebook and Google had done in Australia, when they decided to push back and say, you're here, you need to pay taxes. And there was a brief moment where Google and Facebook kind of shut it down in Australia, and the backlash that they received. So,
Mm-hmm.
this is a way of trying to level the playing field globally. NCAA, as many of our sports fans know, they've relaxed their name and likeness rule. That has that has the potential for good for athletes, some athletes, not all. And it has not so good news potential for like smaller athletic conferences and particularly HBCUs. Because with this relaxed rule, you now have that will be yet again another recruitment tool that the big schools, big conferences can say, listen, we have people in our booster organization that can sponsor you, that, you know, and they can broker those deals. That's things that smaller conferences may not be able to do, and HBCUs definitely would not be able to do. And then so it's important for us to see the whole big picture, the motivation why this rule was relaxed, one. And then two, we need to be the village with our student athletes in that, especially our first gen student athletes who may not be financially literate or fiscally savvy. And so how do you coming in 17, 18, 19-year olds coming in and having the ability to brand themselves in a way where they can see, recoup and recover this money. And so be on the lookout for that. We've talked about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They're not going away. They're not going to go away. And so we need to figure out the best way to access that. And for those who don't know what NFTs or non-fungible tokens are, it's an electronic way to show proof of ownership, whether it's an object, proof of ownership in an object, proof of ownership in a collectible, or proof of ownership in art. And that's where it's starting at now, but it has the potential to expand to be so much more. Why it's so difficult is because when we think in terms of our common knowledge now, if I have an art and I have a print, if I have a piece of art, I can make duplicate copies and sell it. Yes, but then that individual has a ownership of a copy, not ownership of the original. And the NFT is using blockchain technology to show ownership of the original, not of the copy. And so that's why it's not going to go away.
And I will say this, I'll have you put a pin in that. So many of you know we have Black blockchain consultants, and it's always been about the business of blockchain. Blockchain is going to be a $3.1 trillion industry, and there aren't enough of us in it. So it's funny you're mentioning NFTs today, because Eric Spence, who many of you know if you've been around 10K for a long time, is we used to call him the Titan of tokenization. Tokenization is the whole NFT thing. And I was thinking about him today, and I wanted to ask him if he would do a special session on the business of NFTs. So
yes.
One of the things that happened, I think this weekend, is a tribe called Quest has put their royalties on the blockchain through NFTs. Wow. I believe it was, so it's in this Discord group that we have. Anybody can join it, blackblockchainconsultants.com. It's free if you want to learn more about what's happening within blockchain. And so
blockchain
there
is
are a lot of use cases now. And what we don't want to be is just consumers. I'm sick of us being consumers. So I'm going to text Eric. It's actually on my list of stuff to do, and ask him if he would come on and do this special session for us around the business of NFTs and the business of tokenizations, and how people are going to make money from it, and how you can do that as well, or you can invest in it, etc. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And that is an excellent segue, because one, yes, we need to be about the business of blockchain. Blockchain is not going anywhere. It is the game. It's not even a game changer. It is literally going to be the reality. And so we need to, again, be mindful of not just being consumers, but also being producers within that realm as well. And for those of us who are not entrepreneurial, um, but are more gifted in terms of employment and in using our employment to invest, the employment numbers are in. Um, Unemployment, which is really, really weird, because if you listen to the news, you hear that there's more jobs than people. But the unemployment rate for the younger workers was actually up 32%. And what they found was, of those, only 81%, and when I say younger workers, I'm talking like college and immediately post college age. So 18 to 25, not quite 30. 81% whites were employed, 66% Asian, 63% Hispanic, 51% Blacks found employment. Um, and then of that population, 38% of those who were employed found work through family and friends, and only 18% found them through job boards. So there is
It's
much
really
work to be
funny you're
done.
mentioning that too, because I've been wanting to I have so many content ideas in my head. I just need time to get them out. And one of the pieces of content I want to do is Black people need nepotism. Black people need
Yes,
nepotism.
yes.
So
And we go
nepotism,
out of our way not to.
not well, yes, and we usually don't have the structures
Mhm.
within our families to do nepotism. So
Yes.
there will be some time where I will start doing, it'll probably end up just being 2 to 3 minute, like on a podcast, audio, no video
Mhm.
type of things for me
Mhm.
to get
Mhm.
this stuff out. But that's one of the things I've really been thinking about is we need to create more of a structure where nepotism
Can
is
can be
involved,
facilitated. Yeah.
because we're not going to be able to get from 51% to 81% without it.
Without it. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then finally, we've got two more things. So we've got what is being now called the Great Resignation. So in terms of the economy, we're rebounding from the recession. And remember, in previous conversations, we've talked about whether or not that rebound was going to be a K shape, a V shape, a U shape, or a W shape. And we said it depends upon where you are in the stratosphere in terms of the economy. So as we are rebounding from the recession, what the trend is, what we're now a phenomenon that we're calling the Great Resignation. And the Great Resignation, in April, 4 million, 2.7% of the US workers, 4 million people quit their jobs. Globally speaking, 41% of global workers have considered and have started the process of quitting their jobs. And the reasons that they're citing are a need for better work-life balance, which is something that which is what we've kind of realized that is possible given the pandemic. Some didn't like their jobs to begin with before the pandemic, and now, as a result of the pandemic, are reevaluating their career paths. And then some are just leaving for better opportunities, whether it's entrepreneurship or a different or better position to, in terms of changing their career path. And so as we see this conundrum, if you will. So you have employers who say they can't fill their positions. And then you have high unemployment. And then on top of the high unemployment, you have people who are quitting their jobs. And so there's this disconnect. And so I personally believe that the disconnect is that our from on the employer side, I think that there's unrealistic expectations, and compensation does not match the unrealistic expectations. And I think that coupled with a need for better work-life balance is what's causing the employment rate to be as high, unemployment rate to be as high as it is, and also what's driving many people to quit and pursue other interests. And so as I speak in my econ classes, when you're looking at a labor market and you've got prices as wage and quantity, demand is labor force. If the wages are too low, then raise your wages. We need to revisit, job descriptions, and see how that kind of plays out. And then at some point, you should start seeing the labor markets move. The problem comes when you have government intervening with policies that are detrimental not just to households consumption, but it is detrimental because it artificially lowers or keeps wages depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you see and it will manifest itself out in mental health and other issues. And so it's a cycle. And so I think
So
in
what
this
is the
instance,
government do? I'm sorry, what is the
okay.
government doing to keep the wages depressed? I haven't heard any of the policies around that.
Okay, so if you are looking across the country, there are certain states. Okay, right now, one of the byproducts of the pandemic was the federal government stepped in and said, we're going to, in addition to what you would get from your state in terms of unemployment, we were going to provide this funding, budgeted for it and everything. You have certain states that have said, we want people, the employers are calling, they say they can't find warm bodies. And the reason why they can't find warm bodies is because people are getting this federal money on top of what they would get from us, the state. So if we reject the federal money and let the state money run out, that will force employees, that will force the workforce to go back to these jobs. And for some, it will. But by and large, what's going to happen is that you'll find some who will go and find other means. They'll either go to the gig economy, Uber Eats, and all, that kind of. They'll do the gig economy thing. Some will do entrepreneurship. Some will struggle a little bit more, because I'd rather do that than to go to a low-paying job that I don't like and be underemployed.
Some people are even forecasting additional marriages or like a real uptick in marriages and people
Yes.
moving in together for
Yes.
this as well. Yeah.
And they will do all of that before
Mhm.
they will go and do this, and especially when you talk about, we're still having the conversation of whether or not to raise minimum wage from 720, the national minimum wage from 725.
Mhm.
And so when as consumers, we operate rationally. And if, this bundle will allow me to live, not necessarily live comfortably, but live better than I would
Mhm.
otherwise, then
Mhm.
I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
And when you
Or
have
even the
government,
same.
or the same, or
If it's
just
the same, then I
maintain.
don't have to
Exactly.
do as much. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. Maintain. And so what by the government saying we're rejecting the federal money, that's the
Mhm.
government intervening,
I
at
got
the
it.
state
So it's
level.
state government, which makes sense to me. So I had heard about that.
Yeah.
I had
And
heard that the states were intervening, and
yeah.
I hadn't heard it in terms of them that being an artificial way to keep wages low. But it's interesting that you're talking about this, because just today I was listening to a podcast and they had a segment on it about investment bankers having a really difficult time finding junior associates. And
Yes.
there was a time, you and I probably remember, in the 80s, the 90s,
Hmm.
you would be banging down the door to get into these
Yes.
firms. Well, now they
Yes.
can't find anybody to do what they call the grunt work.
Right.
And there are investment bankers that are high up that are having to turn business away because they don't have enough
To do.
processors to
Yes.
do whatever the grunt work is, the administrative work.
Right.
And
Right.
I thought about it and I thought, well, gee, if I were 20 years old, being, just who I am, the gift of gab, I would start calling some of these people and saying, look, I'm smart, I don't have any experience, but if you bring me on at this rate and give me training for 3 months, I will knock it out the park for you. And I will tell
And
you,
that will work.
some of your kids need to consider doing something like this. I got a
Here,
job.
yeah. But here's the problem. Here's the problem with that.
Okay, go ahead.
So you have people that would be willing to do that.
Uh-huh.
They would be willing to do that if they had the ability to do it from home, work from home,
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
and or not have the crazy hours,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's on the labor side. From the employer standpoint, the employers, yes, they want someone to do the grunt work, but they want them to come from a top tier university.
Mm-hmm.
They want them to have a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
possibly a certain GPA
Mm-hmm.
with that degree from that top-notch school, and the ability to do, all of these different certifications or have access to all of these different software, or whatever that qualifications are, which
Right.
is
The
why I said
series,
earlier,
the different
the series,
series,
yeah,
certifications,
you're not going to
etc.
come out the gate with a series 7, a series
Mm-hmm.
63, you're not going to come out the gate like that, and
No,
so
but I do think so. If we were to think about it, if we were serious about wanting to get into investment banking,
mhm,
if I were 20 years old and I called 100 investment bankers,
mhm,
I believe one of them would say, you know what? I like the fact that she just had the guts to call me. I'll give her a try for
uh,
90 days. One
that's
thing
yeah,
here. Now, if you're 20 years old, no kids, no responsibilities, you live at home, go into the office. I mean,
right,
some of it does have to be a
right,
little give and take here.
take,
But
and
talk
that's it.
about a great way to get in and
Get your
like
foot in the door. Get
get
your
your
foot in
foot
the
in the
door.
door. I think for those of us who are of a particular age and have particular skills, like myself, I
That
have
would be the
calls coming in. Yes, I have the flexibility.
right,
However, with that
if
51% rate of
right.
unemployment, sometimes
You
you're
had
gonna have
to
to do what you have to do, especially if
exactly
you don't have kids and you don't have, like even if you have a student loan or something like that, try to defer
just do
it.
that. Exactly, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But and as a business professor, I always encourage my students. We have to look at what we're majoring in
Mm-hmm.
too, because it's okay to major in management, it's okay to major in marketing, but finance and accounting
Mm-hmm.
are two areas that I don't see, and it's not it that I don't see a lot of our kids majoring
Right,
in,
right.
and
If
that's
I could go back, I would do accounting. I have to admit, if I
same.
could go back, I
I would have done
struggled with
finance.
accounting a little bit, but the truth is, I really didn't pay attention to it like I should have. And if I had just stayed with it, I still would have been fine.
For me, it would have been finance.
I would have studied accounting and I probably would have sat for the CPA exam.
Mhm.
And then you're able to
That's the one.
navigate through the
Exactly.
finance world with that CPA. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Jeffrey's saying pandemic caused many to reevaluate the value they place on their time. That's
Exactly.
true. Um,
Exactly.
there's also a lot of reports that are saying that a lot of resignations come from moms who don't want to put their kids back into schools,
Exactly.
or they've noticed that they can make it with that one salary coming in from dad,
Hmm.
and the mom can work part-time and be at home with the kids and
And
homeschool.
they'll do
There's
it.
been a huge increase in homeschooling as well.
There
George is
is.
saying, who has the power now? Yeah, look, it should. I think that
It's
we
shifting.
see it shifting in so many places because of blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum. You're seeing it. There was a 9-hour decentralized finance conference that happened a couple of weeks ago. I'm muddling
Hmm.
my way through it, listening to the
Hmm.
replay. But you're seeing it in finance. You're seeing it in
Yes.
labor. You're seeing it in
Across
um,
industries. It's
in all
across
sorts of
industries.
industries. Exactly.
It's
So
across
Latrice
industries.
saying, me too, I would definitely focus on accounting if I could go back. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I had a
It's
couple of other things on on my list here. So
Okay.
one of the things you talked about was the attack on the meat warehouse and I
JBS,
want to
yes.
JVS. There was also a huge attack on one of the energy plants as well
Yes,
that
yes.
affected that affected certain parts of the
Power
country.
grids. Hmm.
Yes, and I was doing, I read about that as well. Your kids, if they have an interest in cybersecurity, like there's so many jobs out there, and now they may not
They're paying.
even need a college degree to get in.
Correct.
They
Correct.
may just need
Correct.
a couple of
Certification.
certifications and they're ready to go.
Yes.
And
And some
one
of
of
those
the
certifications, some of those certification programs give you work experience so that when, as you're getting the certification, you're getting the work experience,
Mhm.
and then you can put all of that on your resume and head out the door and go.
Yeah. And for some of you who are looking for new careers, 40 is not too late to get in.
Right.
You,
Correct.
because especially if you are doing, let's say you've done healthcare for the past 20 years, and now you want to do cyber, and you're able to do cybersecurity for healthcare companies with
Mhm.
that entire healthcare experience you've had for the past 20 years.
Yes.
These are some of the ways that you're able to take what you've done and
Hmm.
repackage it and then be able to
Yes.
do stuff from home, you know?
Yes. Exactly.
Cheri was saying, if you do well at cybersecurity hackathons, you can get hired on the spot. Very true. Very true.
Definitely.
So yeah, the ransomware attacks.
Hmm.
Now remember, I have to do a business plan for a client. I'm like, how do I know this? And it's because I had 2 weeks ago did a business plan for a cybersecurity company, so that's how I know this.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So
I
so
got
yes.
one last thing. I got one last
Yeah,
thing
one
that I
last
think you'll
thing, and then
appreciate.
I want to go over a couple of other things that you said
Okay.
as well, and I have some additional questions. So go ahead.
Okay, this one I think you will truly, and those of us who are in the 10K project family will truly appreciate this. So, as you know, I think last month or the month before was the commemoration of the Tulsa massacre, the 100-year commemoration of the Tulsa massacre.
Are we about to get
And
our reparations?
no, we're not going to get reparations. We're
I
going
thought,
to have, they're going to have difficulty, Oklahoma is going to have difficulty giving them reparations. However, it has not gone unnoticed by various US venture capitalist firms, because of the whole Black Wall Street um, soundbite. It has allowed US venture capitalists to take a look and see how they have contributed or not contributed to Black entrepreneurship and Black economic wealth and Black economic empowerment. And surprise, surprise, they realize they've come up short with regards to funding and securing funds for women and minority founders. And so I thought this was the for me this was the cherry on the top for this session, because here at the Black 10K project, you're an early what we call early adopter, and have been innovative in pushing that agenda in terms of supporting entrepreneurial pursuits. And so to see that it took the commemoration of a massacre 100 years later for US capitalist firms to say, oh, we might need to start investing in women and minority owned companies. I thought that was interesting. So this was our what is this, third quarter, second quarter uh, our second quarter fireside chat on what's been going on and how can it impact us. Hopefully you will see things that kind of trigger, oh, well, there's an opportunity here and there's an opportunity there, and I can see how that now I understand why I'm paying more than I am or need to pay.
yeah.
So
So I'm going to read a couple of things in YouTube, and
okay.
then I'm going to come back here to
Okay.
Latrice's comments. So
Okay.
Trent was asking about the DeFi conference, and could I share the information about it? So uh, If you email me, Cheri, sorry, info@the10kproject.com, info@the10kproject.com. I will send it to you because I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, and I'm not in that specific YouTube page to look at it. So, Trent is saying no reason why most of us shouldn't be going to work. So, Trent, I don't know. That's yeah. To each his own with regards to that.
The beauty of choice and
Yeah.
individual personal freedoms.
Yes, and then Trent is also saying the trades are always hiring and paying. I have heard that as well.
Mhm.
I have heard that there's difficulty getting on the construction sites, but then I've heard other
Yes.
people say, either own your own business and get on the right
Mhm.
list, the
Mhm.
right government list, and they have subcontracting requirements, but you got to
Yes.
know how to play the game with that. So I will say, because I have somebody who is a current client who is starting a construction company, there is a clubhouse. Even though it's for Black women in construction, men, I think you can still go. The ladies are very nice. It's a very small group, which I like. So you're able to go up and get your questions answered. It's run by 2 or 3 ladies who have been in construction a long time. And when I ask my questions, I'm like, these ladies are willing to share about what's really happening in the construction industry. It's male dominated. It's majority dominated. I'm going to say it like that so we don't get the YouTube issues. Um, but they're like, okay, this is how you maneuver through construction. Um,
Yes.
and it's every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's called Black Women in Construction Room on Clubhouse. And I think it's a group that they have, but I've been twice and it's really good. So that's my
And
suggestion.
infrastructure. We talked about this in the last previous quarter. Infrastructure, the project, Congress is that much close, is a little bit more closer to signing off on the legislative bill that would fund and finance infrastructure. Now,
Mhm.
get in now. That
And after what
way it's
happened in
coming, demand
Miami,
is coming to you. Exactly.
after what happened in
Exactly.
Miami with that apartment building, I mean, look, thank
Yes.
God I don't live in an apartment anymore because I was like, oof.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yes, we're
Yes.
going to have to in this country, we're going to have to do something because there was a bridge that collapsed, and then there was
In
this
Texas.
apartment
Yeah.
building,
Mhm.
and those people weren't poor.
No, not
That
at all.
they were
Not at
not
all.
poor. So
Not at all.
so look, there's going to get a point where people are going to start really pushing this
Yes.
infrastructure thing. Um,
Yes.
okay, so I have so much to talk about.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
I got Latrice's comment here too. So Latrice says, I know certain cities have started planning for reparations, but I don't see it being nationwide. So I'm going to do another segment. I promise, like I said, I have all of these ideas. Instead of asking us for reparations, asking for resources. If we ask for reparations overall, you're going to have 52% of the country who ain't having it.
Right.
My question is, how can we get the resources we need within our communities? And yes, I know that we deserve reparations. Both sides of my family we're slaves, so I get it. However, with where we are right now, if we repackage it to, hey, Goldman Sachs, that $10 billion worth of resources we're getting. Hey, JP Morgan, hey, Harvard University, we know all of these institutions owe us. Going in a little bit differently, this is just my idea. I'm going to put it up. I hope it goes viral. If we repackage it to resources and ask how can we get trillions of dollars worth of the resources we need,
Hmm.
both domestically and internationally, and what those resources look like, I don't know. But
I think, I think in the packaging, I don't think it necessarily needs to be either or. It can be and both.
mhm,
But I think in the packaging, you have to. It's almost like a quid pro quo kind of thing.
mhm,
If I'm asking for resources, I've got to package it in a way that you see the benefit. You see that you're going to
as the
get a
company.
benefit of it as the
Yeah.
company. So when I am having those discussions and I am I am fortunate enough to be able to learn a lot from William Sandy Doherty, who has been, he's in Duke, and he has been talking about reparations since the 70s.
Yeah.
And learning from him as he's walked this through. One, we need to make this change our language in a way that we not only just say, so hey, give. It's about righting a wrong, and then here's how you benefit as well. And I think if we package it that way, then we will be able to start seeing some hearts and minds change, especially when we're talking about corporations. Because as I say in my econ classes, it's not about, when I'm asking for this, it's not that we're not going from a quarter slice to an eighth of a slice. It's what we're talking about is an 8-inch pie versus an 11-inch pie.
Make it everything bigger. Yeah.
So if we're able to have that conversation where everything gets bigger, because if we receive reparations and resources, the economy gets better. The economy is sustained longer. Everybody benefits.
And that's actually been proven by Morgan Stanley. When our businesses, first of all, welcome to the 10K Project, everybody. If you're not a member of the 10K Project, I really should tell you what we do. We are a community of small dollar investors that put our money together to fund Black-owned businesses. Minimum investments are often $100. Every Tuesday, we come together and we hear from a Black entrepreneur. They do something called a Bet on Black pitch. And each individual person on the Zoom call can decide if they like that business and if they want to be an investor in that business. And once we invest, we usually get shares or partial ownership in that business. And that's how we can work together to build Black wealth. So if you want to find out more, weinvestus.black, weinvestus.black. That's our membership drive website. So thank you. I meant to put the commercial out there for the 10K Project as well. You can definitely go and check it out. I do want to have, though, the reparations debate with a couple of people, because I do think that the repackaging is, and I like the with the understanding that the resources conversation,
we need to have that resources conversation.
Yes,
and we can emphasize
yes. And then Trent is asking, what exactly are we asking for in reparations? I think that may be part of the problem. I've heard various requests. But one thing that I think is flowing through all of the requests that I've seen is better infrastructure within our schools and more loans and funding for our businesses. I've seen that pretty much in
across the board.
Yes, across the board. Those are the two big things that I've seen. I don't know, Dr. Cheri, if there are other things you've seen across the board.
At the base, the foundation has been education and business.
Yeah.
At the base.
I've seen other people talk about environmental justice as well, because a lot of times in our neighborhoods, the environment is negatively affected because of things that they're doing there. That's another thing I see probably 50% of the time. But I do believe personally, if we handle those two things, then a lot of our issues. So Charles is saying, shouldn't we concentrate on building our own economy? One of the things I keep hearing from people, I am not an economist, we got an economist here, I'm not an expert, but one of the things I hear from people often is we do need more resources from outside of the Black community in order to get on par with other communities. So if we just did it ourselves with our own resources,
we don't have the resources.
We don't have enough resources. Yeah. So what we're doing at the 10K Project now is a great start, but we're going to need resources from we're going to need cash injections, just like Yeah, just like any business needs cash injections, and when they have the right amount of cash coming in, that's how you end up with Facebook, Google, et cetera, because they're properly capitalized.
And here's the other piece to that too. We are consistent. We have those within our community that say we should do it ourselves and do it on our own, as
Mhm.
if, to kind of like raise ourselves from our own bootstraps,
Straps, yeah.
but without fully appreciating that the reason why the majority is able to do and have what they have is because they had the government to intervene on their behalf
Yes.
through different policies and legislation. They were able to, whether it's the Homestead Act, redlining, voter suppression, which is what, voter suppression, which we've got going on currently now. There's
Mhm.
been laws. The government has always intervened that has allowed the majority to get and maintain. That's an outside influence.
Mhm.
That's on when you if you look through history, and if you start with the ending of slavery, we were craftsmen.
Mhm.
We could build our economy, and we were able to build our economy. And
And
because
we
we were
did build
craftsmen
it.
and we were skilled, and we were able to do that because,
Mhm.
and we did do it.
Yeah, we did.
And there were those in the majority who couldn't, because they were dependent upon us. And so we have to remember, yes, should we do it on our own? Yes, by all means, we definitely need to. Can we support ourselves more, better, differently? Absolutely. But we cannot do so and say, well, we don't want outside investment. If we accept outside investment, we need to make sure that there are rules, regulations, guidelines, whatever, stipulations in place. But we should not accept being to do it, to become empowered without the assistance. We need the assistance.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we've earned it. And we've earned it.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree, definitely. So, I have a few things on my list then. Oh, I
Mhm.
want to go back to one more thing you talked about, which was the space war and the supply
Yes.
chain. So,
Yes.
again, this is another opportunity when we start looking 20 years, 30 years down the road at the businesses that we want to be investing in now that can
Mhm.
have ripple effects for us. This is one of them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
again, my favorite thing, don't just think about starting them, think about buying them
Buying.
as well. Buying companies that already have the equipment, the manufacturing, the capability, the past performance, and then we add this on top of it. So I'm going to keep
Yes.
saying it, and someday
Yes.
people are going to start coming to me with these types of businesses like, Sure, we got a deal.
Yes. Yes.
Actually, I spoke with somebody on Friday who's doing that. They've got a Black network of people who are buying businesses, and we're going to have multiple conversations with regards to that.
Yes.
Um,
There's no
so
need to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to.
no, no, I'm not a fan of that at all. So, okay, so here are a couple of there are the things that I had on my list, and some of them
Okay.
you already talked about. Number one was you're going to notice here a theme: labor shortage, which we talked about,
Mhm.
food shortage, which you didn't talk about,
Mhm.
housing shortage, which you didn't talk about, and birth shortage, which you didn't talk about.
Yes.
So, and then inflation was the fifth thing that I had. But let's deal with the shortages overall because
Yeah.
there is within economics and people talking about the economy. These
Mhm.
are the four things I keep hearing
Mhm.
over and over again. And the labor shortage is not just what's happening today. They're
Right.
expecting a labor shortage over the next few decades.
Yes.
Um, the food shortage is coming.
Mhm.
The housing shortage is here and
Mhm.
is expected to continue. Along with inflation, people are saying that there will come a point where regular people cannot buy a house. The American dream is
Correct.
slipping away where you can buy a home, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then birth shortage. They did such a good job of telling teens not to get pregnant that teens are not getting pregnant. Older women are not getting pregnant.
Right.
The birth rates in first world countries are just sharply down. And now we're starting to import people because we don't have enough young people. And what I heard today that was interesting, I'm like, I hadn't thought about it like this, is that they're saying that because the birth rate is so low right now, that in the next 20 years, when kids are supposed to be like buying homes, they expect that there'll be an oversupply of
Oversupply of
homes.
homes. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's not enough births happening right now, and even Fox News is begging its viewers
Yes, yes,
have
yes.
kids. That's not us that they're asking to have kids, but they're
No, not at all.
asking their viewers to have
And it's
kids.
not
So
for those reasons why they're saying Fox News is saying have kids either. So
yes.
we have to look at the motivation for it. But yes, um, this is not actually this is not a new phenomenon.
Mhm.
When we study the evolution of a civilization, as the civilization becomes more and more advanced, more and more educated, you will see a dip in birth rates. Um, and then as you see that dip in birth rates, then yes, you'll start seeing influx of immigrants to do those jobs that citizens wouldn't do or don't do or can't do for whatever reason. So the birth rate, the decreasing birth rate, which is creating panic with the majority, um, goes straight directly into the labor force. So that's why, while we have a shortage now, why that shortage is going to be extended, because families we're not having kids,
Yeah,
and we're not having,
we're not reproducing
we're
ourselves.
not,
So
the
a
birth
lot of
rate.
people are having one kid or no kids. And
Yes.
I believe we are seeing what India did and what China did 20 years ago, and the US government is panicking. That's what I
Yes.
personally,
Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, now
Yes.
China's begging people to have 3 kids,
Exactly.
where they just had a
Exactly.
one-child policy for the longest time.
Yes. Since 19, I want to say the late 70s, early 80s is when China implemented their one child
I don't
policy.
know. Yeah, I know it's been decades. And
Yeah.
then, with India, I don't understand how nobody thought about this, but they had a one-child policy, and boys are more preferable than girls in India, and they started killing the girls. And now you've got these grown men with no one to
With no
marry.
wives.
And I'm
Yes.
like, nobody thought of that?
And China had the exact same thing when I was living there. China was going through the exact same thing because male children were preferred over females. And
Mhm.
so then you were seeing the same thing. And then it got to a point where the few girl children that were born had their pick of the men. But on the positive side, on the negative side, because you have so many males and you have this aggressive nature, they were seeing an uptick in crime.
Yes. And
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 so,
unfortunately rape. They unfortunately
yeah,
raped that,
yes,
well, in India, they
very,
raped that poor girl. I mean,
yes,
in front of
yes. And
everybody.
that all of that is
Yeah,
part of this. And so the US is seeing, we see China, we see India, we don't want that to happen
yeah. I have one
overall.
more thing to add
Okay.
in. Now, I haven't seen it that much because I think that it's going to take a while for it to grow in terms of an uptick. But I'm starting to see Asian men in media with Black women. Start paying attention to this. There was recently a movie
Yes.
of an Asian kid who just so happened to play basketball and his Black girlfriend, and they're living in the hood doing this, that, and the third, right? I mean, it was
Yes.
a love story. It was kind of like Love
Right.
Jones, I think,
Right.
you know, but we're starting to see within media Black women being coupled with,
With
and I'm
other
not like so
ethnicity.
pro-Black that I like, look, date who you want to date,
Right.
marry who you want to marry. I believe in interracial if you find the right person for you. I definitely do.
Yes.
But I've noticed
We're
it in media
normalizing
when
it.
I saw
Yes.
a few
Yes.
Asian men with Black women in movies and on commercials. And I know, and I watch a lot of documentaries
Yeah.
like this. I'm like the group
Yes.
girl that watches these types of documentaries.
Yes.
I'm just saying,
I would say this, and Georgia brought it up. She's just put it in the chat, which is what I was
Mhm.
getting ready to
Yeah,
say. Oh, so the media, when we want to change the hearts and minds and the values of a civilization, media is the best way, the quickest way to do it. And so when you look at commercials and you see interracial couples and you see movies and you see television shows, that's a way of conditioning and socializing the society towards that ideal. We saw that in the 80s with the LGBTQ community. We've seen it across the board. If you want to condition a society to think or change a value, media is the best way to do it. But then what Georgia said, which is what I was going to mention also, is the reason why here in the US, we're kind of late to the party with the Asian man, Black woman thing, because on the continent of Africa, you it's
it's an
more
uptick.
common.
Yeah,
Yes. And
yeah,
but that stems from China, going onto the continent of Africa and encouraging Chinese citizens to become expats on the continent in order to secure. And it's not for social, or here in the US, we say we're doing something for democracy. It's not to promote communism. It is strictly economics, right? So um, China has invested and has been investing since the decolonization and freedom fighting on the continent. And so they went from politically supporting the continent of Africa now to economically supporting. And they do so by encouraging their citizens to go to the continent, to live there, to raise families there. And so, and a part of that includes, engaging it with the different nationalities on the continent in a way that economically, I'm going to send my people there. We're going to put them in management positions. We're going to, do the infrastructure. We're going to do telecom. We're going to do whatever the industry is, but go there. We'll support you until you can get on your own. And so, on the continent, Asian men with Black women is becoming, it's there.
yeah.
We're just
And I
now
mean,
seeing it
Black
here.
African women are just like any other women. They want the best man with resources. And if you've got an Asian man there with resources and he can provide her with a comfortable life, fellas,
Hmm. Hmm.
this is a part of it, right?
This is part of it. This is
And
part of it.
yeah, we're looking really at survival of the fittest, where 3, 5 generations from now, the world is going to look
Completely different.
different than
Vastly
it
different.
is today. Yeah.
Vastly
So,
different.
and
Vastly
Glenford
different.
is saying it's becoming common in the Caribbean and Latin America too.
Yes.
I can believe
Yes.
that. I can believe
Yes.
it. So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, what do you do when you have an overage of males? You have to do something with all
And
of these men. You
yeah.
have, so
Yep.
nobody thought about it 30 years ago. So now they're like, well, where are the women at? In Africa, in Black America, in terms of unmarried, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, so yeah. So Glenn for saying I'm a product of that. Oh wow.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear about your experience sometimes if you want to come on, Glenford. Because so I'm going to bring this from political to economics, because this is really
Yes.
what we're talking about here is economics with all of this. When we start looking at these trends, we don't want to look at just what's happening today. We want to ask, how
Down
is
the
this going
road.
to affect 30 years from now, 50 years from now, the trends, and start getting in early and being able to ride the wave like everyone else does. So,
Economically speaking, um, we're seeing the model with China.
mhm.
So China had the population thing going on. They were trying to compete as they were opening up their economy, because they used to be what we call a closed economy. They only dealt within their own country. But as they opened up and started trading, doing international trade with other countries, and then trying to compete with Europe and the United States,
Mhm.
that also meant, okay, so we've got this problem with males. So what do? We're going to send them to these countries. So they send to the continent of Africa, because on the continent of Africa, you got all of its vast natural resources,
Mhm.
and you need natural resources manufactured into finished products.
Mhm.
And there's a whole supply chain that goes from raw material to finished product that eventually gets sold globally.
Mhm.
So when you are sending your citizens to the continent of Africa, when you're sending them to the Caribbean, when you're sending them to Central and South America, you're doing so with the mindset of what are the economic opportunities available to me?
Mhm.
How can I benefit from those economic opportunities?
Mhm.
And in the case of China, how does the Chinese government benefit from that, economically speaking? So
Awesome.
if you have, you're sending someone to another country, or they're coming here to the US, start looking at, as you said, those trends. So if we see an uptick in, like we saw the disaster that happened in Florida, and while we're sitting and glued to the TV to see, how that plays out, they're already thinking, okay, there's going to be a construction crew that needs to go. We've got Israel.
Demolition.
Israel sent their teams. Central and South America sent teams to go in and dig. There's a demolition team that's now got to demolish the remaining parts of that building. And while all of that's going on, there's been an uptick in requests from condominium and home associations in Florida for inspectors to come and inspect buildings. And then once the inspectors make their assessment, you need construction companies to go in and repair and mend those buildings. And so while we're looking at Florida and Miami, we need to start looking all the way up the coast.
Up the coast and sea to shining sea.
Sea
Don't
to
forget
shining
about
sea.
Alaska. Don't forget about Puerto Rico.
Right,
AOC was
right,
talking about what's still happening in Puerto Rico. We've got Guam. We've got all
exactly.
military
E-
bases all across
Exactly.
the world. So
Exactly. And then
yes.
you have on the West Coast, you've got Oregon and Washington State with triple digits,
Mhm.
and no fans, no air conditioning, and trying to get fans, air conditioners from other states there.
Mhm.
You've got forest fires in California, and everybody, every year, okay, California has another forest fire. California has another forest fire. But what people fail to realize is that that's an industry unto itself, and
Yeah.
there is a whole supply chain in addressing that problem.
I
And
wanted
that
to talk
problem,
about that. I can't
okay,
divulge too much, but I have a prospect for my business plan who hopefully
to
will become a client. They have a solution for it, but
mhm,
with the California wildfire issue, but there's a lot of politics that's happening there. So I just want to say sometimes we're like, why doesn't someone address that problem? Sometimes it has been addressed, but the politics are so difficult
to
because
maneuver them
these
and
big
yeah,
companies provide a band-aid. You have a smaller company that has,
the
I don't know,
solution.
the solution for it, the surgery, whatever
Hmm.
needs to take
Hmm.
place. However, the Band-Aid company has been um,
Lobbies.
lobbying and putting money into political campaigns and getting their politicians into
Hmm.
office for 30, 40, 50 years, that the new guy comes in with the solution, but not as much money, and it just doesn't go through. So yeah, Terrence is
Exactly.
saying politics. Yeah. So sometimes it will that is also, as we get into business and get into investment and wonder why things aren't happening as fast and get
That's
moving,
why. That's
sometimes
probably the primary reason.
yes,
Not
yes,
the only reason, but it is the primary reason.
yes.
And
So
and
we've
how
got
that goes towards that whole thing with California, and the
mhm.
fires goes towards housing, because
Yes,
they're seeing exodus. People are leaving California because
it droves.
real estate is is exponentially just outrageous.
Mhm.
And then I've got to run the risk of rebuilding every year or every other year because
Mhm.
of the potential, depending upon the track of the trail of the fire. So
Right.
why do that? Deal with the environmental hazards that come associated with it. Now I'm just going to move inward,
Mhm.
and that's what's
Cheaper.
causing this, and it's cheaper,
Mhm.
and that's what's causing this shortage on housing.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's, we need to stop thinking of things in isolation and see the larger picture, and
Mhm.
then find where the holes are,
Mhm.
plug the holes.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to again give everybody my list. And if you're a bit of a geek and you just want to see some YouTube comments and documentaries on these things, the four shortages: labor, food, housing, and birth, meaning people, live birth shortages. All four of those I'm seeing the trends for. And the fifth thing is inflation,
Yep.
hyperinflation,
Yes.
and having a 30 to 50-year trajectory. And with our family banks, thinking about how do we prepare our grandkids and great grandkids for a world that we cannot even imagine.
Exactly.
The problem solving that they're going to need to do to be able to make it and make it through, all we can do is try to prepare some sort of a baseline for them. So
Yes.
with that, final comments, Dr. Cheri, before we leave?
I don't have any final comments other than, while I share with you all things that have happened, again, going back to that critical thinking through, if this is what's going on, where's the flaw, where is the hole, where is the gap, what kind of investments do I need to make to
Mhm.
fill the hole and make the gap in a way that I reap or recover some type of compensation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So someone's asking for your contact information. Do you have like a YouTube channel or Instagram or anything like that?
I am on Instagram, Dr. Cheri Phillips. I do have a YouTube, but that's basic economic concepts that I generally send my students to for additional assistance. So I don't have content per se, like, in terms of like a podcast or anything like that. Best way is, like I said, Instagram. I'm also on Facebook a little bit, not a whole lot, but mostly Instagram is the best way to reach me.
All right. So
And
everybody,
Twitter, and
oh,
and all
Instagram
of
and
it.
Twitter. Dr.
Instagram is,
Phillips on
and
Twitter.
it's Dr. Cheri. It's Dr. Cheri Phillips on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, perfect, everybody. So you've got Dr. Cheri's contact information. Please follow her, engage with her, also share her content as well.
Please,
And
please.
we will see you next week for another Building Black Wealth session. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.